Mom stole my college fund while I was at Grandma's funeral to pay for her stepson's education. But Grandma left the house to me in her will, so now I packed their bags and put them out the door. Their reaction was, "I've always believed that life's greatest lessons come from its most painful betrayals." My name is Kara, and I was only 21 when the world I thought I knew crumbled right before my eyes. I had spent my whole life saving every penny toward my college fund, a dream that represented not only my future, but also the promise of independence that Grandma had always encouraged. I was on the verge of stepping into a new chapter, armed with determination, hope, and a scholarship I'd nearly earned on my own. Yet nothing could have prepared me for the betrayal that would shatter that dream. It was the day of Grandma's funeral, a day heavy with grief and reverence, when I discovered that my college fund, which I had painstakingly built over the years, was suddenly missing. I learned later that Mom had diverted those hard-earned savings to pay for her stepson's education. In the midst of mourning and heartbreak, I felt the full sting of betrayal. Not only had she stolen my future, but she had done it at the most vulnerable moment, when my heart was already broken by the loss of the woman who had been my guiding light. The funeral was a somber affair held in the small, familiar church that Grandma loved. I remember sitting in a pew, tears blurring my vision as I clutched a worn photograph of her. Her kind eyes, her gentle smile, a silent reminder of all that was lost. Amid whispered condolences and the soft rustle of hymns, I felt completely isolated, abandoned by the one person who should have protected me. That isolation soon gave way to a searing anger I could no longer contain. Days later, as I returned to our family home to sort through Grandma's belongings, I uncovered another bombshell. A sealed envelope tucked away in her desk. With trembling fingers, I opened it to reveal her final will. In it, Grandma had left the house, the very home where I'd grown up, to me. It was a twist of fate I never saw coming. Even in death, she had believed in my worth, in my right to build a future for myself. That document, fragile yet potent, became both my inheritance and the catalyst for my next move. I spent that night alone in the quiet of the empty house, the air heavy with memories and unspoken promises. The contrast was jarring. On one hand, the wound of a stolen college fund. On the other, the unexpected gift of a home, a tangible legacy from Grandma that proved she always believed in me. In the solitude of that midnight hour, as I pored over the will and reread old letters from Grandma, a plan began to form. I realized that I would not allow Mom's betrayal to define my future. I vowed that, come morning, I would confront the injustices that had plagued our family for years and reclaim every bit of my stolen life. I remember that morning vividly. The smell of fresh rain mingled with the lingering scent of old wood, and the light filtering through stained glass windows made the room feel both sacred and surreal. I had come to sort through Grandma's effects with the hope of finding solace in her memories. Instead, I found the painful truth: an email from the bank detailing a transfer from my savings account that I had painstakingly nurtured over the years. The amount was substantial, nearly enough to cover a full year of college expenses. My hands shook as I replayed every moment when I'd deposited each check, when I'd scrimped and saved every dollar from odd jobs and birthday gifts. My heart sank with each passing second, the shock morphing into a deep, unyielding anger. How could Mom, the person who was supposed to support me, have so casually stolen from me? I searched through my phone messages and found the moment of betrayal, a curt text from her on the day of the funeral. It read, "Don't worry, I know what's best for everyone." The words echoed in my mind, a cold reminder that my dreams had been deemed expendable in favor of someone else's education. That revelation was compounded by the stark contrast of Grandma's final gift. I had been so absorbed in my sorrow and betrayal that I almost overlooked the elegantly penned note accompanying the will. Grandma's delicate handwriting expressed her deep love and unwavering faith in my potential. It was as if she had known that one day the scales of injustice would need to be balanced. Clutching the envelope, I felt a spark of hope ignite within me, a promise that I could, indeed, forge a path forward even from the wreckage of betrayal. In that moment, every memory of past slights came rushing back. Birthday parties where I was overlooked, family gatherings where my achievements were dismissed, and the countless times I had quietly endured the preferential treatment given to others. All those moments coalesced into a single resounding truth. I had always been the quiet sacrifice, the one whose needs were perpetually ignored. But now, armed with the proof of my inheritance and the evidence of my stolen fund, I decided that enough was enough. I spent the rest of that day gathering every scrap of information I could find: bank statements, text messages, even fragments of overheard conversations. I created a timeline in my mind, linking every hurtful event to the current betrayal. Each new piece of evidence added fuel to the blazing fire of determination within me. It was clear that this wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern, a long history of favoritism and neglect that had finally reached its breaking point. I resolved to turn my pain into power, to let Grandma's legacy light the way as I prepared for the confrontation that would soon shatter the family's carefully constructed facade. The following afternoon, with a storm of emotions swirling inside me, I sought out a quiet moment with my older sister Jenna, who had always been the mediator in our fractured family. I knew that Jenna had witnessed the same dynamics over the years, though she often chose silence over confrontation. I called her, my voice barely concealing the tremor of betrayal as I recounted what I had discovered. Jenna listened quietly, her silence speaking volumes before she finally murmured, "Kara, I always knew something was off, but I never imagined it would go this far." Her words, gentle yet sorrowful, made me feel both understood and even more isolated from Mom. Jenna admitted that she had seen Mom's favoritism in action time and again, how Mom always seemed to prioritize the needs of her stepbrother and even Emily's children over mine. She recalled subtle moments at family dinners, subtle digs disguised as jokes, and the way Mom's eyes would light up at the mention of her stepson's achievements. Every revelation from Jenna was like a fresh wound reopening, yet it also bolstered my resolve to fight back. That evening, I decided to confront Mom directly. I invited her over under the guise of wanting to talk about Grandma's will and the house. The tension in the living room was palpable as we sat down, the silence punctuated only by the ticking of an old clock on the wall. I began slowly, recounting fond memories of Grandma, then gradually steered the conversation toward my savings and the inexplicable disappearance of my college fund. Mom's face hardened as she listened, her eyes cold and distant. When I finally laid out the evidence, the air in the room seemed to crack like ice. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I demanded, my voice rising with every word. Mom's initial shock quickly transformed into a dismissive shrug. "It was for a good cause, Kara. Your education isn't as important as someone else's future," she replied with an unsettling calmness that made my blood boil. Her tone was clinical, as if my dreams were just numbers on a balance sheet. I pressed further, detailing every deposit, every hard-earned dollar that had vanished. Each rebuttal from her was a fresh insult, a reminder of the years I had spent feeling inferior in my own home. As the argument escalated, other family members began to chime in. Jenna tried to mediate, her voice soft and regretful, while Emily offered a weak excuse about family priorities. But none of their words could assuage the overwhelming sense of injustice that now filled the room. The confrontation ended in a flurry of raised voices and bitter accusations, leaving me emotionally raw and even more determined to reclaim what was mine. I stormed out of the house that night with a head full of plans and a heart burning with the need for vindication. The days that followed were a blur of frantic energy and quiet determination. Alone in my room, I spread out every piece of evidence like puzzle pieces on a table: bank statements, text messages, and even old family photos that reminded me of better days with Grandma. I meticulously mapped out the timeline of betrayal, each new detail fueling my resolve to seek justice. I started by contacting a local lawyer recommended by a friend who had once faced similar family conflicts. During our late-night consultation, I explained everything with a trembling passion. The lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Simone, listened intently and then said, "Kara, what you have here is not just a case of mismanaged funds. It's a breach of trust and a clear violation of your rights. We have a solid case." Simone's confidence was infectious. Over the next few days, we began assembling a dossier that would not only detail Mom's misdeeds, but also expose the long-standing pattern of favoritism that had poisoned our family for years. I reached out to relatives who had quietly witnessed the injustice but had been too afraid to speak up. One such relative, Uncle Ron, recalled a series of gatherings where Mom had openly praised her stepson while dismissing my efforts as overly ambitious. His testimony, recorded on his phone, added another critical layer to my case. Alongside legal preparations, I also sought emotional support from my closest friend, Tasha, who had always been my rock. Over countless cups of tea and late-night video calls, we mapped out every detail of my plan. Tasha encouraged me to share my story online, assuring me that the truth had a way of resonating with people who had experienced similar betrayals. "Your voice matters, Kara," she said firmly. "Let the world see the real you, the one who refuses to be silenced." Inspired by her words, I began writing blog posts and recording vlogs that chronicled my journey from betrayal to empowerment. Every post was raw and unfiltered, recounting not only the theft of my college fund, but also the emotional toll of being cast aside in my own family. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from strangers, fellow survivors, and even a few brave relatives who admitted they'd long suspected something was amiss. Each message, each comment added to the growing chorus of voices demanding accountability. Late one rainy evening, as I sat cross-legged on my bedroom floor with Simone by my side, I realized that the house Grandma had left me was not merely a symbol of inheritance. It was my fortress, my future. It would be the battleground upon which I reclaimed my identity and exacted the justice I so desperately deserved. That night, I drafted a plan so detailed that it left no room for ambiguity. Every step, from serving legal notices to confronting Mom and her cohorts, was meticulously mapped out. In that moment, I transformed from a heartbroken daughter into a warrior, ready to rewrite the narrative of my life. With the dossier complete and my legal and digital alliances firmly in place, I could feel the storm gathering on the horizon. The days leading up to the planned confrontation were filled with a strange mixture of dread and exhilaration. I found solace in small rituals, quiet mornings on the balcony with a steaming mug of coffee, long walks through the nearby park, where I allowed my thoughts to churn and settle into a clear purpose. I invited a few trusted allies over to the house, not for a family meeting, but to help me secure every inch of the property. With Simone's guidance, we changed the locks, installed a security camera, and gathered copies of all the critical documents. Every action was a declaration that I was no longer the passive victim of my own family's disregard. I wanted every step to be as indisputable as the evidence I had collected. One evening, while hosting a small, impromptu gathering with a couple of supportive friends, the conversation turned toward the upcoming showdown. In a hushed, conspiratorial tone, one friend remarked, "It's like you're reclaiming your throne, Kara. Your mom never expected you to have this much power." Her words echoed in my mind long after the conversation ended, reinforcing my belief that I was finally ready to shatter the cycle of betrayal once and for all. The final day before the confrontation arrived with a thick, anticipatory silence hanging over me. I stood in front of the mirror, looking at the determined eyes of the person I was becoming, a person who would no longer allow anyone to trample on her dreams. I clutched Grandma's handwritten note from the will, the faded ink a symbol of her unwavering faith in me, and I silently vowed that come morning, I would make my stand. I would confront every lie, every injustice, and every slight with the full force of my truth. The time for retribution had come, and nothing would stop me from reclaiming my future. That fateful Saturday, as the sun rose over a crisp, clear sky, I summoned every ounce of courage and headed to the house. The atmosphere was electric with tension as family members began arriving for what they expected would be an ordinary gathering. The living room, once filled with warm chatter and laughter, now felt like a stage set for an impending drama. I could sense the undercurrents of unease even in the polite greetings and forced smiles. I made my entrance with quiet determination, every step echoing with the weight of years of suppressed pain. As I entered the room, every eye turned toward me, some with curiosity, others with a guarded sense of anticipation. I cleared my throat and began, "I have something important to say," something I've been holding on to for far too long. My voice, steady yet laced with raw emotion, reverberated across the room as I recounted in painstaking detail the betrayal that had shattered my trust. I spoke of the stolen college fund, of the crushing guilt and anger that had consumed me at Grandma's funeral, and of the discovery of the will that promised me a future, one that my mother had tried to destroy. Each word landed like a thunderclap. I projected images onto a small screen set up in the corner, scanned copies of bank statements, screenshots of text messages, and even snippets of overheard conversations that painted a damning portrait of my mother's calculated indifference. I could feel the atmosphere shift, the murmurs of disbelief and regret growing louder as the evidence unfolded before everyone's eyes. "This isn't just about money," I said, my voice rising with a mix of sorrow and fury. "It's about respect, about the recognition of my worth, and about a future that I fought for with every breath I had. You stole not just my savings, but my hope." The room fell silent, the only sound the heavy beating of my heart and the low hum of a refrigerator in the kitchen. My mother's eyes darted away, her face contorting into a mixture of anger and shame. Emily's smirk faltered, as even those who had once quietly supported her now wore expressions of regret. For a long, excruciating moment, the silence stretched on, pregnant with the weight of unspoken truths. Then, as if on cue, a relative in the back whispered, "I never thought this would come out," and the dam of pent-up emotions finally broke. The confrontation escalated rapidly from there. My mother attempted to defend her actions with cold, calculated words, asserting that she had done what was necessary for the family's greater good. But every justification crumbled under the scrutiny of undeniable evidence. I recounted instances from our past. The countless times I had been sidelined, the subtle ways in which my dreams were dismissed in favor of someone else's ambition. I revealed how every sacrifice I'd made, every late night spent working 2 jobs and scrimping for my education, had been reduced to nothing more than a number on a bank statement. I watched as the facade of indifference on my mother's face melted away, replaced by shock and a dawning realization that she had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. One by one, other family members began to speak out. My older cousin, who had always seemed too timid to challenge the status quo, admitted that he had witnessed her repeatedly prioritize her stepson over me, even in moments that were meant to be sacred. His voice trembled as he said, "I always knew something wasn't right, but I never imagined it would be this." His confession added a new layer of gravity to the situation. And soon the room was filled with a chorus of voices. Some filled with remorse, others with defiance, each one exposing hidden truths that had long been buried under years of secrecy. Every revelation built upon the last, transforming the gathering into a battlefield of raw, unvarnished emotion. I could see tears welling in the eyes of those who had been silently complicit, and even Emily's once smug expression began to crumble as she realized the full extent of her mother's betrayal. The air was thick with tension, and every whispered apology or regretful sigh only underscored the magnitude of what had been done. I stood there, my voice steady but filled with the pain of a lifetime, as I declared, "I will no longer allow this injustice to stand. I will reclaim what is rightfully mine, and I will not rest until every wrong is made right." That moment of declaration marked the tipping point. With the evidence laid bare and every hidden truth exposed, I knew that words alone would not be enough. I announced that I was taking legal action, not only to recover my stolen college fund, but to force a reckoning for the years of neglect and favoritism that had defined my family's legacy. With the support of Simone, my lawyer, and the allies I had gathered, I prepared to serve formal eviction notices to my mother and the rest of the household members who had benefited from her betrayal. I spent that afternoon meticulously packing up every document, every piece of evidence that would form the basis of my legal claim. I called an emergency meeting in the front hall of the house, and as everyone gathered once more, this time with an air of dread and inevitability, I delivered my final ultimatum. "This house, which Grandma entrusted to me, will no longer be a monument to your manipulation," I declared, my voice ringing out clear and unyielding. "You have until the end of the day to collect your belongings and leave. I will not live under the shadow of your deceit any longer." The reaction was instantaneous and chaotic. My mother's face contorted in shock and disbelief. Her eyes widened as she stammered, trying to find words to justify her actions. Emily's smug demeanor vanished, replaced by a look of utter horror. Even the normally silent stepbrother seemed taken aback, as if realizing for the first time that his privileged position had come at the expense of someone's future. I moved through the room with measured steps, handing over copies of the legal notice, my hands steady despite the torrent of emotions inside me. Each person's reaction was unique, a mixture of anger, regret, and a dawning understanding that the balance of power had irrevocably shifted. In that charged moment, as I watched them scramble for their belongings and mutter half-hearted apologies, I felt a profound sense of liberation. Every word I had spoken, every piece of evidence I had laid bare, had culminated in this decisive act. I was no longer a passive victim. I had become the arbiter of my own destiny. The weight of years of betrayal lifted from my shoulders as I realized that I had finally reclaimed my future, a future that now shone with the promise of justice and self-respect. In the days that followed the confrontation, the fallout rippled through our family like a tidal wave. The house, once filled with the echoes of suppressed laughter and furtive glances, was now eerily silent. My mother and her cohorts were forced to confront the harsh reality of their actions. Public reaction was swift and unyielding. The story of my betrayal spread on social media, with friends, extended family, and even local news outlets weighing in on the scandal. Messages of support poured in from unexpected quarters, and the overwhelming response left no doubt that justice was on my side. I received phone calls from distant relatives who admitted they had suspected something was amiss for years, and from former family friends who expressed shock and dismay at the revelations. Even Emily, who had once basked in the glow of favoritism, now seemed isolated, her once assured demeanor replaced by a hollow regret. At one point, I received a tearful message from a cousin who said, "I never thought you'd have the strength to do this, but you've shown us all what it means to stand up for yourself." Those words, simple yet powerful, confirmed that the scales of justice were finally tipping in my favor. Standing in the doorway of the now quiet house, I watched as the last of my mother's belongings were loaded into a battered car. The scene was surreal, a mix of chaotic packing and the silent acknowledgement that nothing would ever be the same again. I felt a pang of sorrow for the family that had once been my home, but that sorrow was swiftly replaced by an overwhelming sense of empowerment. I had taken back control of my life, and in doing so, I had exposed a legacy of manipulation and greed that could no longer be hidden. As I locked the door behind me for the final time, I realized that my journey was far from over. The confrontation had been a necessary reckoning, a moment that not only stripped away the remnants of my stolen dreams, but also paved the way for a future defined entirely on my own terms. My voice, once silenced by years of neglect, now echoed with the certainty of someone who had fought through the darkest storms and emerged unbreakable. In the weeks that followed, I retreated to the sanctuary of my new home, a modest, sunlit apartment that had become my haven. The days were filled with a bittersweet blend of solitude and renewal, as I began the painstaking process of healing. I spent long afternoons poring over old journals and letters from Grandma, each word a reminder of the love that had once buoyed me through life's toughest moments. Though the sting of betrayal remained, it had transformed into a catalyst for growth, a painful yet necessary stepping stone toward a future where my worth was measured not by the whims of others, but by my own resilience. I started reconnecting with those who had always supported me. Regular coffee dates with Tasha and deep, heartfelt conversations with Jenna provided a much-needed counterbalance to the lingering pain. I found solace in creative pursuits as well, enrolling in a writing workshop and starting a blog where I chronicled my journey. Every post was a declaration of independence, a testament to the strength that had carried me through years of injustice. The blog quickly gained a following, and I received messages from readers who found hope in my story, each one affirming that I was not alone. Every morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. I took charge of my finances, meticulously planning my next steps, whether it was saving for further education or investing in small projects that could one day turn into a thriving business. The house that Grandma left me became more than just a symbol of inheritance. It was a beacon of new beginnings. I renovated it with care, turning neglected rooms into spaces of creativity and comfort, each brushstroke and every fixture a symbol of my reclamation of self. As the months passed, the scars of betrayal slowly began to fade, replaced by an unyielding determination to live life on my own terms. I often found myself reflecting on that turbulent time, a time marked by pain, but also by a profound awakening. I realized that the very injustice that once threatened to derail my dreams had instead forged within me an ironclad resolve. I learned that standing up for oneself is never easy, but it is the only way to reclaim the narrative of your life. I forged new relationships, ones built on mutual respect and genuine care. I nurtured bonds with mentors who inspired me to chase my dreams, and with friends who celebrated every small victory along the way. I set clear boundaries with those who had once taken advantage of my trust, ensuring that my future would be defined by fairness, empathy, and the unwavering belief in my own worth. Each day became a canvas on which I painted a future free from the shadows of the past, a future where my aspirations, my education, and my dreams were no longer negotiable. I also became an outspoken advocate for others who had experienced similar betrayals. Through my blog and social media, I shared not only my pain, but also the lessons learned from my journey. I encouraged readers to stand up for themselves, to question systems that favored the few at the expense of the many, and to embrace the power of their own voices. The empowerment I felt was contagious, and soon my story began to inspire a community of resilient souls, all united by the belief that justice, though hard-won, was attainable. Now, as I sit by the window of my renovated home on a cool autumn evening, I look back on the tumultuous path that brought me here with a mix of sorrow, gratitude, and quiet pride. The journey was long and arduous, marked by the bitter taste of betrayal and the searing pain of loss. Yet every hardship, every sleepless night spent poring over evidence, has led to a profound transformation. I am no longer the naive, hopeful daughter who once believed that family meant unconditional love. I have become a woman who understands that true love and true justice must be earned and fiercely protected. The house that Grandma left me now stands as a monument to my resilience, a place where every room echoes with the lessons of the past and the promise of a brighter future. I know that the scars of betrayal will remain, but they no longer define me. Instead, they serve as a constant reminder that I have the strength to overcome any injustice, no matter how deep the wound. Looking forward, I see endless possibilities stretching out before me. I plan to continue my education, perhaps even pursue a graduate degree that will allow me to advocate for those who, like me, have been marginalized and overlooked. I have dreams of starting a foundation dedicated to empowering young women and fighting financial injustices in families. Every step I take is infused with the knowledge that my worth is not measured by the actions of others, but by my unwavering commitment to my own future. As I close my journal tonight, I feel a sense of calm resolve, a quiet understanding that while the past may be filled with pain, it is also the foundation upon which I will build a future defined by strength, compassion, and relentless self-respect. The echoes of that fateful betrayal still linger, but now they are interwoven with the triumphant notes of a new beginning. I smile, knowing that no matter what challenges lie ahead, I will face them with the courage that has carried me this far. And so, my story continues. Not as a tale of victimhood, but as a chronicle of rebirth and empowerment. I have reclaimed my future, and in doing so, I have discovered that the most powerful form of justice is the courage to stand up for yourself and to create a life that is undeniably, unapologetically your own.